Now, there are concerns about the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. This now gives, of course, the Taliban total control of the government. Many have already fled the country out of fear. Let's unpack this current situation and what it means going forward. Professor Yossi Mekelberg is Associate Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House. He joins me live now from London. Professor, thank you so much for joining us here at ENCA. So let's go back 2001. The Americans invade Afghanistan. 20 years later, the Taliban are back in power as they were back in 2001. Are we just, it's almost a 360-degree turn here in terms of what the Americans have. Did they achieve anything in their last 20 years? And have the Taliban changed in any way whatsoever?
Good evening. Well, maybe the Americans and their allies achieved 20 years of relatively calm in terms of counter-insurgency, counter-terrorism, and they managed to subdue Al-Qaeda. They assassinated Osama bin Laden. The question is what happens next, what they leave behind them. And there were improvement, there was progress in Afghanistan in terms of human rights, of economic development, the rights of women. But the minute that the US and the other allies left Afghanistan yesterday, finally, and as a result of it, the Taliban is in complete control of the country already the last 2 weeks, and the government collapsed like a house of cards. The question is what happens next? What happens next to human rights? Is it going to be a return to the Islamic extreme version that was between 1996 to 2001? And in this case, is it going to be again a hub for terrorism as it was under the Taliban? This is the question that I think we all ask ourselves.
Let's talk about that. Will it become a hub for terrorists? Already, Al-Qaeda congratulated the Taliban and also calling for Kashmir liberation. But when Al-Qaeda comes out with a statement congratulating the Taliban, that sends a bit of a warning, isn't it, when it comes to what you're pointing at now in terms of Afghanistan going back to being the a hub for terror or for terrorists.
This is a real worry, and we see not only Al-Qaeda, there is also ISIS-K that is based in Afghanistan, though they rival the Taliban. So the question is whether Taliban matured over the last 20 years and being what it was back in 1996 to 2001, something in between government and a revolutionary movement. 20 years later, there is some level of maturity there that again, I don't expect them to turn completely different into Afghanistan into a liberal democracy, but at the same time, they will become more pragmatic and understand that they, for their own sake of governance, they need to cooperate with the world in different ways and have a dialogue, open a dialogue in a way that they didn't have then. Otherwise, if this is becoming again a hub of anti-Western countries and a hub for terrorism, probably the United States and the allies will have to give an answer to that. As you mentioned, it's not only what happened in the West, it's also what happens in Pakistan, what happened in India, in Kashmir, what happened in the other republics close to the border, what's going to be the impact. That is the worry.
Let's take a look at the diplomacy that the Taliban will have to start engaging if they're to be accepted as a legitimate government. Will they, just from your analysis, do you think they will actually bring in some of the former government officials from the Afghan government that was elected into power, per se? That was also pretty questionable. What steps do you think the Taliban has to come up with? What's the first thing you want to see from the Taliban that they can show us that they are now a mature movement?
I think the next days and weeks will tell us more. Because on the one hand, we had certain declaration come from spokespeople there. They're talking about, for instance, they will allow women to work and and study. At the same time, they tell women that they should stay at home for their own safety. So there are contradiction there. They say that they won't look for reprisals against those who left behind and worked with the allies. And we hear already that some been killed. It hasn't been confirmed independently, but there are some news, bad news about this, that some of them look for reprisals against those who work with the allies. And I think the question, what is the dynamic that's going to evolve right now in Afghanistan? And probably there will be some conflicting opinions within the Taliban, what's between the more extreme and the more pragmatic, where to take the country from here. And which forces are going to win the day is going to define whether they can engage with the outside world or we back to 2001.
Now, we can't not talk about Afghanistan without bringing in Russia. You know, they were in Afghanistan. They were booted out of Afghanistan per se. And now news coming out of Russia is that there's military exercises in Central Asia because they are worried at the moment about what may happen in Afghanistan under the Taliban. What part can Russia play in all of this?
I think not for nothing Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. And I think the Brits failed it, the Russians failed it, and the Americans and its allies experienced it in the last 20 years and definitely in the last 2 weeks. I don't think anyone has any appetite to intervene directly, militarily, within Afghanistan. On the other hand, Russia, as specific interests very close to the border, especially the republics around them, with Tajikistan, the Central Asian republics, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and other republics, how it's going to affect what happens there. If there is a spread of extremism, Taliban styles, ISIS styles, Al-Qaeda style, into that, that's when Russia might start feel threatened, because then it can threatens also Russia, and we know the experience Russia with Chechnya. And I think the message now from Russia, as long as you keep it within your borders in Afghanistan, this is your business. If it goes beyond that, this will become our business.
Professor, so let's just go back to 2001 because of 9/11. The Americans ended up, invading Afghanistan. Is this the end of the war on terror per se? Is this what we're witnessing here?
Well, I think this was a regrettable notion to begin war on terrorism by George W. Bush. But the problem with the way that the West intervened, and led by the United States, because it confused from the beginning, was it about Al-Qaeda and try to stop Al-Qaeda from conducting similar atrocity as took place in 9/11? Was it about bringing the Taliban down? Was it about nation building in Afghanistan? And gradually all became mixed up. It was a mishmash of different strategies there. And as a result of it, yes, they managed to stop Al-Qaeda, and Taliban was toppled. But reality is 20 years later, is probably Taliban is stronger than ever. Now with all the equipment that were left by the Americans, they are better equipped probably than ever. And whether they allow other terrorist groups to find as a hub, it's a question. What I think we can say almost for sure, the idea of nation building collapsed altogether. The concept of it by the United States in Afghanistan collapsed altogether.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Yossi Mekelberg there, just shedding a bit of light in terms of what's next for Afghanistan now that it's back under the Taliban. And Professor Yossi Mekelberg is with the International Relations and Associate Fellow of the Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House.